Welcome to another episode of LifeCrafting Podcast. This is Irina, a fitness and life coach, and today we're going to talk about the 5 most common childhood traumas caused by parents. I would like to start this episode with a small disclaimer that we need to keep an open mind on this and we need to show empathy both to ourselves and to our parents because although there are a lot of narcissistic and toxic parents, most of the parents are actually people like us. Nobody's perfect, and most of the parents didn't get a manual on what to do and what not to do. Nobody's 100% ready to become a parent. So especially on the parents of the older generations, we have to also consider that they didn't have the resources and the knowledge accessible to research and get educated about these things. So, all things considered, let's begin. You might be wondering why are we talking about childhood trauma and why it is significant. And on that, I want to share with you that I have encountered a lot of people, especially older people, being like, "Oh, what's wrong with all these youngsters? Now everybody's traumatized, and back in my age, these things were normal." Yes, this is where generational trauma stems from, and basically what it is that those people replicate the behaviors of their own parents because they have nothing else to compare. So this is the normal for them, and they do not understand why this is wrong or how that affects the children. Childhood trauma has always been around, it's just that we now have access to knowledge and education about it, plus all the countless studies that have studied how the childhood trauma has impacted the child's emotional development and well being, as well as the long lasting impact in adulthood. If you're a parent listening to this podcast and you feel personally threatened or attacked by what I'm saying, then keep listening with an open mind. You might learn a lot of things about yourself and about the people around you. To make everything a little bit more understandable, let's imagine that you are a child. When you come to this world, you are desperately trying to make sense of your surroundings. You're just coming into a totally different dynamic and situation with a ton of different stimuli around you. And the only way to make an understanding of the whole environment around you is to actually rely on a specific amount of repetitions between an action and a reaction so that you can establish connections. Let's paint a picture of a baby you, that you're having some sort of normal discomfort, you need a change of diaper, you're hungry, you're in pain. The normal thing to do is to cry. If every single time that you cry, your parent is coming over to soothe you, to change the diaper, to feed you, and make you calm down, and that happens with very, very high precision every single time that you cry, after a certain amount of repetitions of this action and reaction, you create a sense of security. You create a sense of stability and predictability, and you learn that your communication method, which is crying, will always yield the soothing that you need when you need it. However, if you're crying and somebody shows up, and then the next time nobody shows up, and then the time after that somebody shows up with 20 minutes delay, this is inconsistent. That means that you don't have a certain amount of repetitions of the same exact behavior so that you can register that as something predictable, safe, and stable to rely on. So, what's going to happen is that you're going to learn that when you are in need and you try to communicate this, it's not a given that somebody's going to show up and soothe you. And then the next time that you are in distress or discomfort, you'd rather just not cry because why to even bother, I guess? That is just a small example to make you understand how the sense of self worth, the sense of belonging, the emotion of protection, security, care, trust are formed in such an early age. The first type of childhood trauma we're going to explore is the trauma of invalidation, which happens when parents ignore or completely dismiss a child's emotions. In real life, that might sound something like, "Oh, you're overreacting. Oh, boys don't cry. Stop crying like a baby," and so on. That creates a very deep feeling of shame in the child and a fear of expressing emotions. And when the child hasn't learned that they can express their emotions with the help and the support of a parent so that they can process it, then they're unable to self regulate. Growing up, that child is going to have such a big difficulty into setting boundaries, and they are going to avoid at all costs any sort of conflict that involves emotions in it because they repress their emotions, because they just don't know what to do with them. They never learned. The second type of trauma we're exploring today is the absence of unconditional love, which basically describes a situation where a child is going to receive love, affection, care, tenderness only based on a positive performance and following what the parent wants, followed up with a withdrawal of any emotion and affection when the child's performance is not the one the parent wants. That might sound something like, oh, I love you if you get good grades, or oh, you did it so bad to the test, you disappoint me. A child growing up in such a dynamic is going to have a very low self esteem, is going to develop a fear of failure, and is going to have difficulty into accepting love because to them, love is not something they're used to. They don't connect that love is something you receive because of who you are instead of what you do and how well you perform. That creates an immense level of stress and anxiety, especially performance based, as the child grows up and becomes an adult, and that frequently expresses itself as perfectionistic tendencies, people pleasing tendencies, and an overall fear of abandonment. They feel that if they are not perfect, or if they don't over deliver, they're going to be abandoned and they're not worthy of love, attention, affection, and validation. The third type of trauma is the one of inconsistent parenting, and especially when it comes to rules and consequences. So, that happens, for example, if you're a child and you drop your glass of orange juice the one time, and then your parent is going to shout and yell at you, but the next time that you're going to do this, they're just going to ignore you. That creates a lot of anxiety and confusion to the child, and the child learns that they cannot trust authority and they cannot trust and respect boundaries. This type of trauma in adulthood frequently manifests as impulsivity, difficulty into setting and respecting boundaries, and a lot of self judgment. The next type of trauma is the one of the hypercritical parent, which describes a parent that only focuses on the flaws and imperfections of the child, constantly micromanages everything that the child does, and never focuses or validates any of the good qualities of the child or their achievements. Real life examples include phrases such as, nah, you will never make it. Oh, why are you like that? You always do it wrong. And also constant comparison. For example, oh, Stevie got an A plus on the test. Why can't you be like Stevie? I have observed through my life coaching clients another phase of that trauma, which is the constant comparison between siblings. Like, oh, your brother is so good at sports. Why do you suck? Oh, your sister is always the best student. Why aren't you like her? Unsurprisingly, the child that experiences this type of trauma is going to develop a lot of sense of worthlessness. They will feel that they don't deserve and they don't worth anything. They will constantly doubt themselves and their own abilities, and they will have severe issues into accepting compliments because they don't believe they deserve it. To them, the praise, the compliment, the approval, the validation is a foreign concept because they don't feel that this reflects their own qualities. So they start wondering, why does that person compliment me? What is their hidden agenda? That worthlessness is going to follow the child into adult life with a lot of negative self talk, a lot of perfectionistic tendencies, and very frequently high functional anxiety. The last type of trauma on our list for today is the one of emotional neglect, which basically describes the behavior of a parent that fails to provide support to the child emotionally and respond to the emotional cues of the child. Real life examples of this are unfortunately countless, and they can include minimizing or dismissing the emotions of the child, the lack of emotional attunement, a lot of emotional unavailability. So imagine being in the same room with your child, but being glued to your phone and you just don't pay attention to the child. Frequently, people that show emotional neglect to the children tend to withhold affection as a form of punishment when the child misbehaves. They ignore all pleas for connection and they devalidate experiences. Imagine that your child is coming home and they're telling you, oh, I've been bullied at school. And the parent replies, no, this is not bullying, you're too softy. Emotional neglect is a very common behavior among toxic and narcissistic parents, and sometimes they even gaslight their own children. They devalue their experience, they distort their reality, and they even shift the blame to their own kids. Frequently, the emotional neglecting parent tends to expose the child to unhealthy environments, not only emotionally, but also practically, having the child experience and witness things that they shouldn't have at that age. Keep in mind that when we're talking about toxic parents, a lot of children have experienced a combination of all these traumas combined. A lot of toxic parents, they suffer from substance abuse and they have an overall profile of passively and actively abusing the child emotionally. Imagine a child that is being ridiculed and shamed for their own emotions, is being threatened that the parent is going to leave them and they're going to withdraw their love from them if they don't follow a very particular type of behavior, a lot of active manipulation, and so on. All these traumas collectively, when the child is exposed to them in the long run, is one of the most frequent causes of CPTSD in adults nowadays. What happens to the child when they experience situations like that is that they create a severe fear of intimacy and they have a big difficulty into identifying and expressing emotions because they never had the space, the protection, the security, and the time to process that from a safe place with their own parents. That very frequently creates a deep sense of loneliness in the child. Growing up, the emotionally neglected child will have a big difficulty into forming deep, healthy, and meaningful relationships for a plethora of reasons. They will most likely attract narcissistic people, firstly, because this is familiar to them, but secondly, try to imagine that you are in a desert and you haven't eaten or drunk water for 10 days, and then somebody shows up with a hot box of pizza and frozen water. You're not going to think, okay, let's take a bite and not overdo it because my stomach is going to get hurt, or let's save some for later. You're going to indulge all the way in until your stomach hurts. That is exactly how love bombing that typically narcissistic people do is going to appeal to the emotionally neglected child that grew up and is an adult now. They are so starved of affection, attention, emotional validation that when they find it, they go all in without thinking how shady and weird that is when it comes out of the blue. It is not uncommon for people that have experienced this type of trauma to develop people pleasing tendencies and a really stressful attachment to their relationships. That might sound something like getting very, very anxious if there is a sudden change in the tone of the voice or the texting style, or they get a reply 5 minutes late, and that creates a triggering response in them. Another phase of that expression can be the emotional isolation. That sounds like someone who is extremely social, but they never share their own emotions and they never show vulnerability in front of other people. These tendencies frequently create a lot of friction into adult relationships. It is not uncommon to hear somebody blaming their partner for being needy and the other party feeling that they are unheard and not understood. Regarding effective communication, how it drastically improves the quality of every relationship we have, and techniques on how to understand and communicate our emotions and our needs, feel free to check my episode about effective communication that you're going to find on the description box below. I hope that this episode was helpful for you, it was enlightening for you, and it helped you understand yourself and the people around you a little bit better. It's really crucial to always remember before pointing the finger at someone to try and understand by showing empathy where the people around us come from. I have included some more resources around this topic on the description box below. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time listening to this episode. You can support me by liking this video and subscribing to my channel, and feel free to share the video with whoever might find it helpful. Until the next time, I wish you well and see you on the next episode.